The cry in the dark, the night was quiet in the lower streets of the alien slums. Trash lay in every corner. The air smelled of rust and smoke. Most people stayed inside after dark. It was not safe outside, not for anyone. But Kellen walked these streets anyway. He was human, strong, and quiet. A worker by day, a wanderer by night. He had no home here, but no home anywhere else either. Then he heard it, a small, weak sound. Like a cry. Not loud, not human. Kellen stopped walking. He tilted his head and listened. Again the sound came. A soft sob, like a child, from behind a wall of broken machines. He moved closer, his boots crunching on old metal parts. The cry was coming from a dark corner, hidden behind two rusted doors, half open and covered with scrap. Kellen pulled the junk aside slowly. What he found made his chest tighten. Inside the small space was a cage, a real cage. Metal bars rusted and bolted to the floor. And inside that cage was a child, alien, small, shaking. Her skin was pale blue, thin and dry. Her clothes were rags. She sat holding her knees, her eyes wide and scared. Behind her, in the shadows, was a larger figure. Curled up, not moving. "Hello?" Kellen said softly. The little girl flinched. She pressed back against the bars, afraid. "I won't hurt you," he said, kneeling. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her lips trembled, and her big purple eyes were full of fear. She looked toward the larger figure behind her. Kellen's heart sank. It was a woman. Her mother. The woman was still breathing, but barely. Her face was thin, her eyes half open. Her arms lay limp beside her. They had been left here, forgotten, locked away like animals. Kellen reached through the bars. The metal was ice cold. "Who did this to you?" he whispered. No one answered. Of course not. He looked around. There were no signs, no cameras, no guards. Just trash, shadows, and silence. Kellen stood up. He looked at the lock on the cage. Alien-made. Not simple. Not something he could break with his bare hands. The girl started crying again, softly. Her hands reached out through the bars toward him. He knelt again and took her hand. "It's okay. I'll help you." She didn't speak his language. But somehow, she understood. Her grip tightened. Kellen pulled out a small ration bar from his coat pocket. He broke it in half and offered it through the bars. She took it like a wild creature. Fast, scared, hungry. She bit into it quickly, chewing with teary eyes. He handed the other half to the mother, but she was too weak to reach it. She only blinked. Kellen sighed. He couldn't leave them here. But if he stayed too long, someone might see him. Someone dangerous. Still, how could anyone leave a mother and her child like this? Suddenly, a low voice came from the woman in the back. One word. "Help." Kellen froze. She had spoken. Barely. But she said it. "I will," Kellen whispered. "I swear." He stood again, his mind racing. He needed tools. He needed help. But he couldn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not until he knew who these two were. Not until he knew why they were in a cage. He placed a soft cloth jacket he had on the cold ground, just outside the bars. Maybe they could pull it in and stay warm. The girl stared at him the whole time. Her hands clutched the food. Her tiny body shook. "I'll be back," he said gently. "Don't be afraid. I'll come back for you." The girl looked into his eyes. Slowly, very slowly, she nodded. Then he turned and disappeared into the dark. That night, the slums stayed quiet. But somewhere in the broken shadows of the city, a human heart had heard the cry of an alien child. And for the first time in days, the little girl wasn't completely alone. Kellen didn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of his old bed, staring. at the wall of his tiny apartment. The room was quiet except for the ticking of a small clock. But in his head, he kept hearing the child's soft cry. The girl in the cage. Her tiny hands reaching out. Her mother, too weak to move. He had seen many sad things before, slavery, war, poverty. But this was different. This was personal now. As the first light of dawn touched the sky, Kellen stood up. He grabbed his tool belt, a small bag of food, a thick cloth, and a pulse cutter, something he had kept from his ship repair days. He left the apartment and walked fast, staying low and unnoticed. The slums were still sleeping. When he reached the alley again, everything was the same. Broken scrap, crushed machines, the same silence. He pulled back the rusted doors. The cage was still there. The child was still there. And the mother had not moved. Kellen stepped closer. "It's me," he whispered. The girl looked up slowly. Her eyes had dark circles under them. Her lips were dry. She was holding the jacket he had left, wrapped tight around herself and her mother. He knelt. "I brought food." She reached for it with shaking hands. This time slower. Less afraid. Kellen unwrapped a soft cake and some fruit. He passed them through the bars. She grabbed it, but before eating, she placed the first piece near her mother's mouth. The woman was too weak to chew, but she opened her mouth slightly. The child gently fed her. Kellen stared, his heart tight in his chest. "Brave girl," he whispered. He looked at the lock again. It wasn't simple. It wasn't made for humans to break. But Kellen had seen tech like this before on alien cargo ships. He placed the pulse cutter against the edge and turned it on. The blade hummed softly. Sparks flew as he carefully cut through the outer panel. The girl flinched at the sound, holding her mother close. "It's okay," he said. Almost. There. Suddenly something moved above them. A shadow. Kellen turned his head sharply. A drone. Small. Black. Floating just over the roof. He ducked, pulling the hood over his face. "Damn," he muttered. He quickly shut off the cutter and backed away from the cage. The drone didn't come down, it just hovered for a moment, then flew off into the sky. Kellen's heart was pounding. "Someone knows," he said under his breath. "Someone's watching this place." He looked back at the girl. He couldn't leave her again. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small scanner. He held it to the lock. The screen blinked. Blue, then red. Lock active. Power source hidden. "Course," Kellen sighed. "Old security trick, hide the battery." He looked around the cage carefully. Then he saw it. Behind one of the bars, barely visible under the dust, was a tiny power cell. Camouflaged. He pulled a wire tool from his kit and slid it through the bars. Slowly. Carefully. Click. The screen blinked. Again. Power cut. Lock inactive. Kellen smiled. He pushed the door gently. It creaked, then swung open. The girl gasped. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She just stared. "You're free," he said. She looked at her mother, then at him. Her lips trembled again. Kellen stepped inside the cage. He lifted the mother carefully into his arms. She was light, far too light. Then he turned to the girl. "Come." She hesitated for 1 second, then grabbed his coat and followed. He led them out of the alley and into the shadows of the slums, moving fast, moving quiet. But as they turned, "A corner," a voice called out. "Hey!" Kellen froze. 2 alien men stood behind them, rough clothes, sharp teeth, yellow eyes. "You," one of them growled. "That's our cage. Our property." Kellen stepped in front of the mother and child. "She's not property." "You'll regret that," the second alien hissed. Kellen didn't wait. He threw a flash pellet at the ground. Boom! Light exploded in every direction. He ran, carrying the mother, holding the girl's hand, heart pounding, down a narrow street, through a broken fence, across a filthy yard, until finally he found a locked gate. He kicked it open and ducked inside, an old warehouse. Silence. No footsteps behind. They were safe, for now. He set the mother down on a pile of cloth. The girl sat beside her, crying softly. Kellen sat down too, breathing hard. He looked at the child. "You're safe now, I promise." She didn't understand the words, but she nodded anyway, and for the first time, she smiled. The warehouse was cold and dark. Old metal walls groaned with the morning wind. But inside, Kellen worked quietly. He made a small bed from blankets, placed water near the mother's lips, covered the child with his own coat. Then he sat by the broken door, watching the street in silence. They were safe, for now, but not for long. He needed help, tools, medicine, a place to hide them properly. And most of all, he needed answers. Who were they? Why were they locked up? Why did those aliens say they were property? There was only one person Kellen could ask. A man, or rather alien, he didn't like much, but one who knew things. A smuggler named Tovak. Tovak wasn't a friend, but Kellen had saved his life years ago. That debt might still be worth something. Kellen stood, wrapped his coat around himself, and looked at the girl. She was asleep now, holding her mother's cold hand. The woman still hadn't woken up. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "I'll be back." Then he slipped out into the city. Tovak's hideout was under a scrapyard near the trade docks. The place smelled of burnt oil and mold. Rusted ship parts were piled into towers. It was a graveyard of forgotten machines and secrets. Kellen knocked on a thick metal door. 3 sharp taps, then 2 slow ones. It slid open with a hiss. Tovak stood behind it, tall and snake-like. He had dark green skin and sharp black eyes. "Well, well," Tovak hissed. "Look who crawled out of the shadows." Kellen didn't smile. "I need information." Tovak chuckled. "You always do." Kellen stepped inside. The door closed behind him. "I found a cage," Kellen said, getting straight to the point. Inside it, a woman and her child. Alien. Blue skin. Faint purple eyes. She's barely alive. Tovak stopped smiling. "Where?" he asked sharply. Kellen narrowed his eyes. "You know them." Tovak walked over to a dusty table, grabbed a drink, and took a long sip. He didn't speak right away. "You need to leave them," Tovak said at last. "Walk away, Kellen. This isn't your fight." "Tell me why," Tovak sighed. "The woman you found, her name is Silai. She was the maid of Commander Varn." Kellen blinked. He knew that name. Varn, rebel leader, killed in a city bombing last year, one of the most wanted aliens in the sector. "Silai vanished after his death," Tovak said. "Some say she ran. Others say she was sold, but the truth is worse. She was betrayed," Kellen guessed. Tovak nodded slowly. "Her own people handed her to slavers. She and her child were labeled dangerous bloodlines. They were meant to disappear quietly." "Locked in a cage," Kellen said through clenched teeth. "She was worth too much to kill," Tovak said, "but too dangerous to set free." Kellen's hands curled into fists. "She's barely breathing, and the girl's just a child." "You think that matters to the ones hunting them?" Tovak said coldly. "There's a price on her head, human, and now you're involved." "I don't care." Tovak stared at him, then shook his head. "You're a fool, but a brave one. Can you help me?" Tovak walked over to a drawer and pulled out a small med kit and a data chip. "Medicine," he said, handing over the kit. "And this chip has a list of safe places outside the city. 1 or 2 might take you in, for a price." Kellen took both. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Tovak warned. "You'll be hunted now, just like them." "I've been hunted before," Kellen said. Tovak gave a dry laugh. "Then good luck, hero." Kellen returned to the warehouse by sunset. The door creaked open. He stepped inside and froze. The girl, stood in front of her mother holding a sharp piece of metal like a knife. Her hands shook. Her face was scared but fierce. When she saw it was Kellen, her body relaxed. The metal dropped from her hands. She ran to him, tears in her eyes. "I'm here," he said softly, kneeling. She grabbed his shirt and buried her face in it. Kellen looked at the mother. She was awake now, barely. Her eyes were open, cloudy, tired but alive. He walked over and knelt beside her. She looked at him. "You came back," she whispered in her broken voice. "I said I would." He opened the med kit and started working, cleaning her wounds, injecting the medicine, giving her water in small sips. The girl sat beside them, watching with wide, quiet eyes. "Your name?" Kellen asked the woman. She coughed softly. "Selai." He nodded. "I'm Kellen, and I won't let anyone take you." She closed her eyes. "Then you will die." Kellen smiled sadly. "Maybe, but not today." Selai didn't speak much the next morning. She lay on the pile of cloth, her breathing slow and shallow. The medicine Kellen gave her had helped, but not enough. She needed warmth, real food, a place to rest without fear. The little girl didn't leave her side. She sat cross-legged beside her mother, touching her face gently from time to time, whispering words in her alien tongue. Kellen didn't understand the words, but he understood the pain. He watched from the corner of the warehouse. His body was tired, but his mind was racing. How long before those men found them again? How long before someone traced him back here? He had to move them. Fast. He took out the data chip Tovak gave him and plugged it into his wrist tablet. The map opened up, showing blinking dots. Some were marked safe, others unsafe, and many had a question mark. One place caught his eye. A farm outside the city, run by old exiles. Aliens who didn't care about wars, bloodlines, or politics, but the trip was long and dangerous. Kellen looked up. The girl was staring at him. Her purple eyes didn't blink. She said nothing, just looked at him like she was studying every breath, every move. Then, slowly, she stood up and walked toward him. Her tiny feet made no sound on the dusty floor. She stopped in front of him and opened her hand. A small broken pendant rested on her palm. It was cracked in the middle but still held the shape of a bird with outstretched wings. She held it up to him, pointing to it, then to her mother, and finally, to him. He understood. Protect her, like the bird, with wings. Kellen took the pendant, gently, and nodded. "I will," he whispered. An hour later, he wrapped Selai in thick cloth and placed her carefully in a small hover cart he had found behind the warehouse. The girl sat beside her mother, holding her tightly. Kellen covered them both with an old tarp. From a distance, it would look like he was carrying junk scrap. He pushed the cart through back alleys and broken roads, avoiding checkpoints and cameras. At one point, a patrol ship flew low overhead. Kellen ducked into an alley, heart racing. The girl didn't make a sound. She had learned silence like a weapon. By midday, they reached the old train line that led toward the outskirts of the city. The tracks hadn't worked in years, but the path was clear of guards. Still, it was far. Too far for someone as weak as Selai. Kellen stopped and poured water into a small cup. He held it to her lips. She drank slowly. Then, her hand reached out and grabbed his wrist, her eyes opened, full of pain but also full of something stronger. Hope. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes begged him, "Don't give up." Kellen nodded, swallowing hard. "We're going. I promised." The sun dipped low behind the buildings as Kellen reached the broken train tunnel. Beyond it was open land, empty, dangerous, but if they made it across, they would be free. He checked the scanner. No patrols nearby. "Almost there," he whispered. Suddenly, a voice behind him. "There you are." Kellen spun around. 3 figures stood at the end of the alley. The same aliens from before. Sharp smiles. Weapons drawn. Kellen stepped in front of the cart. "You're making this harder than it has to be, human," one growled. "Step aside." "She's dying," Kellen said. "What do you even want?" "Orders," the other replied. "She's valuable. The child, too. Dead or alive, makes no difference to us." Kellen's jaw tightened. His fingers closed around a hidden blade on his belt. "I'm not letting you touch them." The aliens laughed. "And how will you stop us?" Before they could step closer, Kellen grabbed a flash grenade from under the cart. He had saved only one. He pulled the pin and threw it. Boom! Light and dust exploded everywhere. Kellen shoved the cart forward, into the tunnel running behind it. Blinded shouts echoed behind him. He didn't look back. The tunnel was dark and cold. Broken lights flickered overhead. The ground shook under his boots. Salai groaned weakly. The girl held her mother tighter, tears falling from her eyes again. Kellen kept pushing, faster, harder. Finally, at the end of the tunnel, the sky opened wide. A field of wild grass stretched out. Old fences, a broken barn in the distance, the farm. They had made it, almost. He reached the barn just as the last light of day disappeared. He knocked on the old wooden door. Nothing. Then again, harder. The door creaked open. An old alien woman stood inside. Gray, skin, wrinkled face, eyes sharp like knives. She looked at Kellen, then at the girl, then at Salai. Without a word, she stepped aside. Kellen pushed the cart inside. Safe. For now. The old barn smelled like dust, hay, and thyme. Wind whispered through cracks in the wooden walls. Faint stars blinked through holes in the roof. Kellen sat near the doorway, eyes fixed on the dark field beyond. He hadn't slept. Couldn't. Behind him, Salai and her daughter lay under a warm wool blanket. The old alien woman, who called herself Myri, had given them soup, bandages, and a place to rest. But peace felt like paper in a storm, thin, fragile, and always ready to rip apart. Myri had spoken little, only enough to say, "They can stay. One night, no promises." Kellen had nodded, grateful, but he knew this couldn't last. Just after midnight, Salai stirred. She sat up slowly, wrapped in silence, and looked around the barn. Her eyes adjusted to the dark, and they found Kellen, sitting with his back to her, watching the world like a guard dog. "You haven't slept," she said softly. He turned. "Couldn't risk it." "You should." Kellen looked away. "Not until I know you're safe." Salai's voice was weak but firm. "You risked everything for me. For a stranger." "I didn't do it because I had to," he said. "I did it because no one else did." Silence passed between them like a cold breeze. Then Salai spoke again. "My daughter's name is Nari." Kellen smiled faintly. "That's a good name." "She hasn't spoken since they took us," Salai said, her voice breaking slightly. "She used to sing, loud and happy. Now, only silence." Kellen looked over at the girl, sleeping beside a pile of hay, a small smile on her lips for the first time in days. "Maybe," he said. "She just needed someone to listen." Morning came too fast. The sun had barely risen when Mary stepped into the barn. Her face was tight, her voice sharper than before. "You need to leave. Now." Kellen stood. "Why?" "3 riders came through before dawn," she said. "Asking questions. They showed pictures. Your faces." Kellen's heart sank. "We'll go," he said. Salai tried to stand but stumbled. Kellen caught her. "You're not strong enough," he said. "I don't have a choice," she replied. He glanced at Nari, who had just woken up. She blinked at her mother, then at Kellen, confusion in her tired eyes. He crouched and held out his hand. "Come on, little one, we have to keep running." She reached out slowly and placed her hand in his. Kellen helped Salai onto a small cargo sled Myri had hidden behind the barn. It hovered just enough to float above the ground. "You can take the dry canal path," Mary said, pointing. "It'll hide your tracks, But go fast. If they find you again, I'll deny ever seeing you." Kellen nodded. "Thank you." Mary looked at Nari for a long time. Then, with a strange softness in her voice, she said, "Keep her safe." Kellen promised. And then they were off, cutting across dead fields and dry rivers, sliding through forgotten places between towns. The day was hot. Dust clung to Kellen's skin. His hands burned from gripping the sled's handles, but he didn't stop. Every now and then, Selai would cough behind him, weak, tired, but alive. Nari sat quietly beside her, holding her hand, eyes wide and alert. They passed broken signs, rusted fences, and old ruins from wars long forgotten. But the silence broke when Nari pointed ahead. Kellen followed her finger. A small bridge. Blocked. A man stood in the middle of it, tall, cloaked, armed, and behind him, two more shadows moved, trapped. Kellen pulled the sled to a stop. "Selai," he whispered, "if I don't come back, take Nari and run." "No," she said quickly. "Don't leave us." He met her eyes. "I'm not leaving. I'm buying time." He stepped off the sled, raised his hands, and walked forward slowly. The man on the bridge lowered his hood. Kellen knew that face. One of the slavers from the alley. Well, the man said. "Didn't think you'd come this far." "She's dying," Kellen said. "Let them go." "Not my problem," the man replied. "Orders are orders." Kellen took one more step. "Then you'll have to take me first," the man laughed. Gladly, he reached for his weapon, but Kellen was faster. He drew a flashblade from his coat and threw it. It hit the slaver's hand with a burst of blue light. The man screamed. Kellen rushed forward, knocking the second one down with a hard punch. The third raised a blaster, but Nari screamed, loud, like thunder, a sound so sharp and high it echoed off the walls of the canyon. The blaster dropped. Kellen used the moment, grabbed the weapon, fired once. The third slaver fell. Kellen turned, heart pounding, face sweaty. Selai had her arms around Nari, holding her tight. Kellen ran back to them. "It's okay," he said, kneeling. "We're okay." Selai looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You saved us again." Kellen looked at Nari. She was shaking, but breathing. "She screamed," he whispered. "She found her voice." Selai nodded. "Because she believed you would come back." Kellen touched the broken pendant around his neck, the one Nari had given him days ago. "I always will," he said. Kellen found a broken cave hidden in the hillside just as the sky turned red with sunset. A collapsed mining tunnel, forgotten, long ago. The entrance was half covered by wild vines and dry earth, perfect for hiding. He pushed the hover sled inside and helped Selai down. Her body was limp, her skin cold. She had barely spoken since they crossed the bridge. Inside it was cool and quiet. A soft drip echoed somewhere deep in the stone. Nari helped pull old cloth from Kellen's pack. She laid it down gently, as Kellen knelt beside her mother. Selai's eyes were shut. Too long, too still. Kellen reached into the bag and pulled out the last injector from the med kit Tovak had given him. He hesitated, then pressed it against her neck. Hiss. Her body jolted. And then, she gasped. Her eyes opened, wide and frightened. Her breath came in short bursts. Her fingers grabbed at the cloth, at the air. "Nari?" she whispered. The child rushed to her side, tears already falling. "Mama!" Selai wrapped her arms around her daughter and held her close, sobbing without sound. Kellen backed away, letting them be. He sat near the entrance, watching the fading light slip through the vines. Minutes passed, maybe more, then Selai spoke. "Kellen." He turned. She was looking at him now. Truly looking. Her face still held the bruises of pain, but something had changed. "You brought us through fire," she said softly. "And I don't even know why." Kellen sighed. "Because no one else did. Because when I heard her crying, I couldn't forget it. Selai reached out a hand, thin, shaking, but steady enough. He walked over and took it. She gripped it tightly. "When they took my husband," she whispered, "I thought the worst had happened." Tears gathered in her eyes again. "But when they took me and caged me with my daughter, I learned what true fear was." Kellen said nothing. He listened. "I didn't cry when they beat me. I didn't cry when they starved us," Selai said. "But when Nari stopped speaking, I broke inside." She turned to her daughter, who had fallen asleep in her arms. "But then you came," Selai whispered. "A stranger, a human, risking everything." She looked back at Kellen. "I don't understand it." "You don't have to," he said. "Just rest." But she didn't let go of his hand. Instead, tears slid down her cheeks. Not loud, not shaking, just quiet, like someone who had held it all in for far too long. She cried for her husband. She cried for her child. She cried for herself. And Kellen didn't say a word. He just stayed there, hand in hers, until the tears stopped. Later that night, after she had fallen asleep, Kellen stepped out of the cave. The stars were bright above the hills. He looked at the sky, searching for movement. So far, no patrols, but they wouldn't be far behind. He took out the tablet again. The map flickered. Only one blinking dot remained, an old spaceport used by smugglers. Abandoned, but still functional. It was far. 2 days' travel at least. If he could get them there, maybe they could leave this planet for good. Start over. Somewhere. Safe. He made the decision then. Tomorrow, they would move again. One last push. Back inside, Nari stirred and sat up. Her eyes searched the cave for her mother. When she saw Selai sleeping peacefully, her body relaxed. Then she looked at Kellen. She walked over and sat beside him. He noticed her holding something. It was the broken bird pendant. She had cleaned it, tied it with a string. She held it out to him again. Kellen smiled and took it. "Thank you," he whispered. Nari leaned against his arm, silent but calm. In that moment, Kellen realized something. He wasn't just helping strangers anymore. They were becoming his family. And he would die before letting anything happen to them. The next morning, Selai woke early. Her strength had returned, still weak, but enough to walk with help. Kellen packed quietly, loading the sled. Before leaving, Selai looked around the cave. "This place, it became our shelter," she said. "But it's time to go." Kellen nodded. "The spaceport, 2 days from here. Maybe less if we move fast. Do you think we'll make it?" she asked. He looked at Nari, holding the pendant again like a good luck charm. "We have to," he said. And deep in his heart, he meant every word. The sun rose red over the hills as Kellen pushed the sled forward, his boots crushing dry grass with every step. Selai sat quietly on the sled, holding Nari close. Her body was weak, but her eyes were sharper now, alive again. Nari no longer looked scared. She held her mother's hand tightly in one and clutched the bird pendant in the other. They were almost there. Ahead, beyond the dust-covered hills, stood the old spaceport. It was falling apart, walls cracked, landing pads rusted, but it still had power. A few ships sat hidden behind broken fences, leftovers from smugglers and traders who had long since vanished. Kellen pointed. "We make it there. We leave this planet. I promise." Selai nodded. "We trust you." But the wind shifted suddenly. Kellen stopped walking. He crouched low, eyes scanning the ridge behind them. Dust rose in the distance. Movement. He grabbed his scope. 2 small hoverbikes. 1 large transport. Armed. Fast. They had been found. "Go!" Kellen shouted, turning the sled toward a slope near the port. "They're coming," Salai held Nari close as the cart rolled faster, bouncing across the rough terrain. Kellen ran beside them, panting, legs burning. Blaster shots echoed behind them, red bolts flashing past. Kellen drew his weapon and fired blindly, buying time. They reached the fence, half broken, sharp metal sticking out. Kellen slashed through it with his blade and pushed the sled through. Inside the spaceport now, just a little farther, but then a blast hit the back of the sled. It flipped. Salai and Nari tumbled onto the dirt, coughing from the smoke. Kellen turned, shielding them with his body. The transport rolled up. The slavers stepped out, weapons raised. The leader, same one from the bridge, smiled cruelly. "You've made this fun, human. But it ends now." Kellen stood tall in front of Salai and Nari. "You're not touching them." "Move," the slaver warned, aiming his rifle. Kellen didn't move. "I said." Kellen pulled a smoke flare from his belt and slammed it to the ground. Boom! Thick gray smoke exploded around them. "Run!" he yelled, grabbing Salai's arm. They moved through the haze. Kellen dragged them behind a stack of old crates. Shots rang out, but missed. Kellen turned to Salai. "There's a small ship at the far end of the pad, still powered. Can you run?" She nodded, holding Nari's hand. "We'll try." He gave her the pendant. "Take this. If anything happens to me, keep going." "Kellen, go." Kellen stepped out into the smoke. He ran left, shouting loud, drawing fire. The slavers chased him. Blasts flew past his shoulders. One scraped his leg. He fell, but got up again, limping. He ducked behind metal beams, returning fire, keeping them focused on him. Each second he bought was a step closer to escape for them. Salai reached the ship, dragging Nari inside. The door hissed open, old but functional. She found the controls. The screen lit up. Fuel, 24%. Engines, stable. Flight system, manual only. She didn't care. "Kellen," she cried, looking out the ship's hatch. But he was still behind. Nari pulled at her hand. Salai turned. Her daughter looked up with pleading eyes. Then, a figure stumbled through the smoke. Bleeding. Burnt, but alive. Kellen. He fell at the base of the ship's ramp. Salai rushed out, pulled his arm over her shoulder, and dragged him up inside. Nari slammed the hatch button. The door sealed shut. Salai sat Kellen down near the co-pilot's seat. "You came back," she said. "I said I would." Kellen whispered, coughing. "Can you fly this?" she asked. "I can try." He grabbed the controls, ignoring the pain in his side. Engines flared. The ship groaned, then lifted slowly off the ground. Outside, the slavers screamed. Too late. The ship soared into the sky. The stars opened before them like a quiet dream. Kellen leaned back in the chair, breathing hard. Salai sat beside him. Nari climbed into his lap without a word. For the first time, she smiled without fear. Salai reached over and placed a hand on Kellen's shoulder. "You didn't just save us," she said. "You became our shield." Kellen looked at her. "I'm no hero." "No," she said softly. "You're something rarer." "What's that?" She looked down at Nari, then at him again. "Ours." The ship drifted through the stars, carrying a broken mother, a silent child, and the man who refused to let them fall. Where they were going didn't matter. They were safe. They were free. And they were together. At last.